That's Aaron Donald talking about Bills quarterback Josh Allen. Aaron Donald compared him to Cam Newton. Josh Johnson, the Rams safety, compared him to Ben Roethlisberger. I had forgotten, Peter, in our current headline at ProFootballTalk.com, Josh Allen responding and reacting a couple of years after the fact to Jalen Ramsey, once referring to Allen as trash. Allen beat Ramsey and the Jaguars after that comment, but now Ramsey and the Rams come to town, and as an organization, this is the Rams' first crack at Josh Allen, who's looking pretty damn good this year.
You know, there's a couple of things about this game. Number one, I knew that we would not get through the week without one member of the Los Angeles Rams using the phrase big boy pads when you play Josh Allen, because I think that's something that somebody says every week about him because he's such a huge guy. There's two things about this game, though. I mean, number one, the Buffalo Bills are going to have to block Aaron Donald, I think, with two people on virtually every snap. Anybody who plays the Rams understands that that's what they're going to have to do. That requires an adjustment for what they're going to do, what Brian Daboll is going to do on offense. So that, to me, is one of the fascinating parts of this game. The other thing is, and I realize this isn't totally game-related, but the Los Angeles Rams made a decision once they found out that you couldn't have a lot of freedom on the road if they were last week staying in Philadelphia, this week playing at Buffalo. Should they stay back east somewhere like the Niners are doing in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, or should they go back home? And theoretically, you would say, oh my God, why would you want to take two extra 5.5-hour plane rides to do this? And I thought Sean McVay did something very smart. He knew that if he stayed east, that for 5 or 6 days, his players were going to be captive in a hotel. And if he flew back and got home to Los Angeles at 10 o'clock Sunday night, then they were going to be able to have a normal Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then half of Friday before going back to the East Coast and getting onto the plane. I thought it was a very smart move because now the players, even though they're not going out and going to nightclubs or whatever, they can live their normal lives instead of being cooped up in a hotel for 5 or 6 days.
These teams are both 2-0. There are 11 2-0 teams. That ties a record. One obviously will go to 3-0 absent a tie. A couple of 0-2 teams. We mentioned this game briefly earlier in the show. Bengals and Eagles. Eagles are getting desperate, but Peter, Joe Burrow doesn't care. As you said, he doesn't care that the Eagles are desperate. He's going to go in there and he's going to fling it around with confidence. And I actually think the Bengals are going to win this game because there's that vibe. There's that it that Joe Burrow has. And I feel like the Eagles currently can't figure out which direction they're pointed in.
Yeah, and I think, the way that the Eagles win this game is to put the ball in Carson Wentz's hands and tell him, you're our playmaker, you're our guy, you've got to make plays in this game. And who would have thought that in week 3 of the NFL season this year, that the Cincinnati Bengals would come into Philadelphia with a better group of skill players than the Philadelphia Eagles have. I mean, we could probably argue about it, especially because the Eagles' tight ends are so much better than Cincinnati's. But I would say overall, on Sunday, the group that suits up skill players is going to be better in Cincinnati than it is in Philadelphia. That puts pressure squarely on Carson Wentz's shoulders to get out of his slump.
Tom Brady returns to Denver for the 18th time. He is 8-9 all-time in Denver. He's never faced Jeff Driscoll in Denver, which should allow him to finish his career at 9-9 in Denver. I can't imagine him playing in Denver again unless he joins another team. Here's Brady yesterday talking about whether and to what extent he's going to make that connection on a consistent basis with Rob Gronkowski.
Well, I think we all have a lot of things we've got to, we're going to be improving from the time we started to the time we finish the season. So I don't think we can be discouraged by certain things. It's some weeks it's going to be some guys' weeks, other weeks it's going to be other guys' weeks. And everyone's working hard at practice to try to find, their spot, their role. We got to figure out what works or what combinations work or what we do well or what we don't do well. And that's just part of the season. And, like I said, you wish everything would be perfect. That's just not the reality of football. There's too many things to orchestrate. There's too many moving parts. You just got to figure out figure out ways to win games.
Through 2 games, Gronk has 2 catches on 4 targets, Peter. I made the point yesterday. Gronk is like the guy who followed his best friend to a new school, but the friend is now paying more attention to his new classmates. I don't know what's up with Gronk, other than when he caught a pass in week 1, it looked like he was running in mud. That may be the problem.
Mike, I hate to keep leaning on this. I feel like every time I've been on this show for the last 6 weeks, I end up talking about the 2 days I spent in Tampa Bay training camp and what I saw. But I'm going to lean on it one more time. And I promise, for the rest of time, I will never bring it up again. But
that means you will next week.
Here's what I saw. Yeah, I will next week, of course. I lied. But here's what I saw in those 4.5 hours watching the Bucs. Okay? There were 2 players on offense that Tom Brady spent a lot of time and threw a lot of balls to. One is O.J. Howard. The Buccaneers and Tom Brady, basically, whether it's said, unsaid, whatever, are trying to save the career of O.J. Howard in Tampa Bay. He's a great football player, potentially, and they want to see that potential come out. That's number 1. Number 2, I said, who in the world is this number 10? Who's this Scotty Miller? I had heard of him, but I didn't know that much about him. And come to realize that that's one of the guys in the offseason that Tom Brady really, really began to make a connection with. And to me, Scotty Miller, even though he's not done very much yet, Scotty Miller is going to be a huge player in this Tampa Bay offense. So those 2 things, understand this. And I think that Brady basically feels, look, a couple of years ago, we won the AFC Championship by me going down the seam 3 times at Arrowhead Stadium to Rob Gronkowski to save the game for us. And I know that I can do that. It's like riding a bike. I'll get the ball to Gronk. I'm not worried about that. I am concerned with every week making sure that we develop the whole rather than just lean on what used to be.
At some point, though, you got to go back to that well of what used to be, or people are going to wonder what in the world is going on and why would the Buccaneers pay $9 million to a guy who was on the field as a blocking tight end, not a pass-catching tight end. All right, Washington and Cleveland getting together. Both teams 1-1. Which one's more dangerous as a sleeper this year?
I think Washington, because Washington's pass rush, I think, is gold. And the reason that the pass rush didn't get home last week is there's not a lot of pass rushes that are going to get home consistently on Kyler Murray. And I think you're going to see this week, I would bet that Baker Mayfield watched a lot of tape of that game last weekend to see, this is the way to evade Chase Young and Ryan Kerrigan and the really strong interior pass rush and Sweat. But the way I look at this team right now, the way I look at Washington is that they're a threat if they can get good enough play out of Dwayne Haskins. And we just haven't seen it consistently yet, Mike. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying we have not seen that yet.
We've got several other 0-2 teams playing this weekend. 4 of them play 2-0 teams. Falcons, Bears, Lions 0-2 against the Cardinals 2-0, Texans 0-2 against the Steelers 2-0, and Titans 2-0 against the Vikings 0-2. Also, the Jets are 0-2, but who knows how many. They're going to be 0-something. I don't see them beating the Colts. But these teams that are in that 0-2 hole, is this when desperation kicks in? Is it going to be the Miami factor like we saw last night, Peter?
It's got to be desperation for the Detroit Lions. Right now with Matt Patricia being, so far gone to respectability, loser of 11 games in a row. He has not gotten his defense together. Isn't that what he was brought in to do, to build a dominant defense? They've spent some dominant defensive player money in free agency on defense, but they haven't played well enough on defense. This, even though I don't see them beating the Cardinals, I'd say this is the most desperate 0-2 team in football coming into this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And, look, the teams are 0-2 for a reason, but we know that the narrative can change quickly. It's one more game. They've only played 2. One more game from all these teams may make us feel differently. But, Sims talks about that tension after you start 0-2. There's a lot more pressure. It's palpable in the building. No one wants to be 0-3 because once you're 0-3, then your season's on the line the next week. Although it may be different this year with that extra wild card berth. Maybe a team that starts 0-3, 0-4 can do what the Chargers did. What was it, 1992? Bobby Ross's first year as the head coach. They started 0-4 and ended up somehow making it to the playoffs.